The Black Faculty and Staff Association welcomes you to our beautiful campus if you are from off campus, and welcomes you to this event if you are from our campus. First, I'd like to advise you to be aware of the closest exit, the exit that's closest to you in case of an emergency. Be sure that you know you have your stuff where they should be and you have a plan to exit the building. They're all marked with the red signs. In the spring of 2000, and also, we ask that you recognize and appreciate the beauty of this theater, which was recently renovated, and leave it as beautiful as you found it. In the spring of 2018, two members of the then Student Activities Committee saw the need for a Black Students Union on our campus. At the time, one of the members saw it as an opportunity. His name is Stephen Atkins. I'm leaving names out because I'm one of them, and it's just awkward to call yourself by name. Mr. Atkins saw it as an opportunity to create an affinity space where Black students could come together and build together as students at QCC. Mr. Atkins and myself then decided to work together to build that coalition with students. 2 years later, George Floyd was murdered, and the campus, our lovely campus, had a lackluster response to the pain and suffering of the members of its Black community. I then heard and saw a need for a more unified caucus of the Black faculty and staff on our campus and administrators, so I reached out to Mr. Atkins to reconnect. This partnership considered forming both a Black caucus and a Black Students Union to support all members of the Black community at Queensborough Community College. Mr. Atkins and I reached out to our respective networks across campus and called for a meeting of the minds. The meeting was called on June 19, 2020, Juneteenth, the Black Caucus had their first meeting. Upon careful consideration and discussion, the group voted to rename itself the Black Faculty and Staff Association, or the BFSA, at Queensborough Community College. The founding members are listed on our website. It's qcc.cuny.edu/BFSA. This event tonight is independently sponsored by the BFSA, but there are so many silent partners and accomplices who, in their support of us, go above and beyond to ensure our success. This self-regulated group, I skipped a paragraph, so I'm going back, the BFSA, organized independently as the very first affinity group for faculty and staff at QCC. Following the model of liberated Black spaces, the BFSA decided to maintain a lateral communal leadership model in which all community members have equal stake despite gender, origin, or age. This model was chosen as a direct anti-racist strategy to decenter white supremacist and patriarchal notions of leadership, and to work with lessons of leadership models used by other Black-centered organizations in the past. Thus, the BFSA at QCC is led by an advisory council and various committees, not by one leader. Again, this event is independently sponsored by the BFSA, but there are so many silent partners or accomplices who, in their support of us, go above and beyond to ensure our success. We would like to thank a few people for making this event possible tonight. First, Lisa Schiffman, who is one of the persons here at QPAC, and Mark Amsterdam. I don't know where he is, but he's instrumental. So tonight, he made sure I had a Persian rug. They have been so remarkable in the setup and in just ensuring that this event is a success. Again, we have many silent partners. Here's one coming through the door. We'd also like to thank Richard D'Amato, who is in the printing department, for this lovely poster that we have here. He is also very supporting and encouraging. The members of the English department, who are in the second row, who are Irvin's colleagues and my colleagues, welcome. Can y'all clap for my colleagues? Don't clap for yourself. Okay, and this department is led by Dr. Margot Edlin, who is somewhere in the back. Margot? Okay, she left. She's somewhere back there talking to Irvin. Is she here? Where? Hey, Margot. Dr. Edlin is the chair. Can you want to stand and do a wave for the people? She does have to leave early, so she's our chairperson. And the Black Network. I don't know if anyone is here from BNN, but the Black Network is a Queens group that helped us to advertise this event. And as you can see, it's so full, but they were really wonderful in helping me to get this event out to the community. And so I'm sure members will show up at some point today, and I want to thank them very much. Mr. Irvin Weathersby is a founding member of the BFSA, and we are extremely proud to celebrate with him the launch of his incredible, timely book, his timely book, In Open Contempt. Professor Weathersby, he's behind the curtain. We want you to know that your village is beside you, behind you, and with you every step of the way. We know that some books are born to change minds, and others, like yours, are born to change the world. Your steps are ordered, so walk in your greatness. Tanisha Mallette is the Chief Content Officer and Director of Communications at Queensborough Community College. Previously, she served as the Director of Communications at Medgar Evers College. Tanisha began her career at CUNY in 2017, following 2 decades in television news. She is an Emmy-nominated and AP award-winning journalist who has worked, I didn't hear any cheers, but okay, y'all stay awake now. Okay, she works here. She's our colleague who has worked in television newsrooms across New York, Maryland, and Ohio. As a reporter and anchor, Tanisha has produced special news segments and covered several high-profile breaking news stories, including the Virginia Tech school shooting and the Ariel Castro kidnappings. Her reporting has led to appearances on CNN and Headline News. Additionally, she is a member of the best sorority in the world, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Oh, can y'all tell I'm a member too? Sorry. And where she recently served as the Eastern Region Communications and Information Committee. It is the largest Black sorority in the world, just so you know. There are others, but you know. Mallette, earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism from the University of Maryland at College Park and a Master of Arts in Corporate Communication from Baruch College. Irvin Weathersby, Jr. is a Brooklyn-based writer and professor from New Orleans, or New Orleans, as he's probably correct me. He teaches here at Queensborough Community College and at City College in the MFA Creative Writing Program. His writing has been featured in, I don't know how to say this, Guernica, Esquire, The Atlantic, Ebony, and elsewhere. He holds an MFA from the New School, an MA from the Morgan State University, and a BA from the Morehouse College, and has received fellowships and awards from the Voices of Our Nation's Arts Foundation, the Research Foundation of CUNY, the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, the American Council of Learned Societies, and the Mellon Foundation. We are happy to have them here together on the stage in conversation, and we are grateful for the presence of all of you who have shown up here tonight. I'm Dr. Carrie Ann Smith. I didn't say who I was. I'm talking to you. I'm Dr. Carrie Ann Smith. I'm a faculty member in the English department. Shout out to all my students who are here tonight. And I present to you, with no further delay, Ms. Tanisha Mallette and Professor Irvin Weathersby, Jr.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I love
What's up, guys?
Hey.
All right, a couple people here.
You know a few of them?
A few, just a few.
Okay, just a few.
Like a fan club over here.
All right, well, you ready, Irvin?
I think so.
All right, well, the first thing we're going to start with is, I'm sure you've discussed this many times, but the title of the book, In Open Contempt.
Yeah.
Talk to us about why this title.
So, how did I come upon this title? Well, at Morehouse College, I had the fortune of reading virtually all of the slave narratives, and I've cataloged them in my mind. And I had this really incredibly surreal experience in Paris with my wife, where I came across this relief that was clearly an advertisement for slavery. And this was 2018 or 17. I'm sorry, not 17. It must have been actually 2016. And I see this, and I'm just really thrown in a state of turmoil. And I'm thinking about all of the language and experiences that I'm reaching for to try to describe it. And I landed on the moment when Frederick Douglass finds out that he's actually a slave. So Frederick Douglass is the father, in many ways, of African-American letters. And in his first autobiography, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, he describes the moment when he sees the auction block in which he will be sold on. And if you know anything about Frederick Douglass, you know that he lived a very charmed life as a boy. He was taught to read. He actually befriended his master's son, and he lived a life of privilege in many ways until his master died. And when his master died is when he found out that he was enslaved. And at that moment, he describes the scene where people like him were reduced to beasts, held in open contempt of their humanity. And I tried to use that phrase to really describe what it means to be a Black American in this time, my ancestors' time, and unfortunately, looks like for the near future.
I know from reading the book, your ancestors, your lineage, your history, that's very important to you. So when you thought about all of that, what made you want to focus on monuments and buildings in open spaces and to do this work?
I didn't actually come to this idea. This idea came to me in many ways. Before I started this book, the book started in earnest in 2017 when the mayor of New Orleans decided to take down 4 racist monuments in my hometown. So at that moment, I was actually writing a work of fiction, and it was based on a sculpture that I purchased in Cuba of a rebelling slave. And I was trying to animate this sculpture. I was trying to bring it to life. I was trying to create something that was expansive. And unfortunately, no one was interested in it. They were like, yeah, try again. It's not working, right? But that's what writing is. Writing is about rewriting, right? And so I was at that moment, I was poring over all these texts about Cuban history, about sculpture, about just art in general. And this moment happens in 2017, and I say, well, wait a minute, I have to go home. I have to go home and inspect this. And in the process of me going home and looking at all of these monuments that were taken down, I'm looking at all the monuments that are still up. And then in that process, I take you around the world through museums, other public spaces, other monuments that I'm engaging in Paris and Venice, South Dakota, all throughout the South.
So the way you talk about this sort of makes sense because as I'm reading the book, it felt like you were inviting the reader on your journey, on your experience of uncovering some of these things. And when you started this work, did you have a notion or an idea of how you felt about these monuments? And did it change or did it double down as you continued to do your research?
Yes and no. Yes, I mean, there's a lot of answers to that. So yeah, I came to some of these spaces where, preconceived ideas. In many spaces I didn't. My mind was changed or altered, my perspective kind of grew, especially when I was in South Dakota and speaking to Native American artists and really trying to get a sense of how they perceived Mount Rushmore, how they perceive Crazy Horse, how they perceive, a lot of the different statuary that exists in South Dakota. Show of hands, how many people have been to South Dakota? 2, 3. Okay, that's more than most audiences I've talked to. So good for you. for those people who have gone. So if you go to South Dakota, you're more likely are going to fly into Rapid City or go through Rapid City, which is like the biggest city there, to access Mount Rushmore. And Rapid City is a city that hails itself as the city of the presidents. So in their downtown area, there is a statue of all of the presidents. And when I was there was one president who was causing some trouble. They were like, we're not sure if we're going to erect this guy. You could take a guess which president this was. He's very singular in the sense that he was very different from some of the other ones. But I say all that to say, I go there and I didn't expect to kind of be wrapped into that controversy. So there's some of these spaces that, yes, I knew going in that I hated this, but other places I grew to develop an appreciation for what I was looking at.
But you started with New Orleans, which makes sense. That's your home. You had a lot of connection to it. Why did you pick some of the other places you went to? Monticello, Virginia. You just mentioned Mount Rushmore, and also the Crazy Horse Memorial in South Dakota. Was there a design for that? Did they demonstrate something that you thought showed more white supremacy in the artwork?
Yeah. Well.
All of that.
I mean, okay. Yes and no. No, there's a lot of answers here. I'll start with how I decided on South Dakota and Crazy Horse. So I'm gonna ask another question. I am a professor. How many of you guys have been to New Orleans? Show of hands. Most people. Okay. Those people who haven't raised, you should go. But those people who have raised, I wanna ask, what is the image that strikes you about New Orleans? If there's a image, the first thing that comes to your mind, what's that image that comes to you? You could just call out. Bourbon Street, okay. Superdome, these are all good answers. What's that? Preservation Hall, all great answers. Okay, so there's a historian here talking about Plessy versus Ferguson, which is great. There's someone else that thought I heard something. The Lower Ninth Ward, yeah. The Lower Ninth Ward. Okay, these are all great answers. Those are all correct answers. It's not the answer I'm looking for, but that's okay. Okay, so someone said Andrew Jackson. That's what I was looking for. So Andrew Jackson in front of St. Louis Cathedral is arguably our city's kind of logo in many ways. If you think about New Orleans, when you think about Katrina, that's where George Bush stood, right? And the backdrop is St. Louis Cathedral and Andrew Jackson. And so Andrew Jackson is still, erect in my city. It's still a big part of what New Orleans means, and Andrew Jackson was the architect of the Trail of Tears, which systematically decimated Native life, Native populations. And so as I'm walking through my city, I'm asking questions. It's like, wait a minute, like why is he still up here? Like what, I have feelings about it, but let me go ask, Natives how they feel about it. And so that's how I got to South Dakota. But places like Monticello, I had to go back to. So some people ask me when this book started. It started in earnest in 2017, but I had an experience when I was a fourth grader when I actually went to Monticello that opens the book. And that was almost my Frederick Douglass moment where I'm at this plantation for Thomas Jefferson, and I was a little precocious, and I was able to kind of put some things together. I was like, wait a minute. So this space here where people who look like me were in chains, and like, how do I reconcile that? And so I had this really bizarre moment that never left me. And then growing up in the deep South, like I would hear stories from my ancestors. It wasn't hard to find white supremacists in New Orleans. David Duke was elected while I was living there, and David Duke was the former Grand Master of the Ku Klux Klan. He was an elected official when I was a boy. And so there were so many examples to find. And so I had to go back to Monticello to say, okay, who am I now as a man versus who I was as a boy? And let me see how I came to this space, or how I come to the space now. So there was a lot of deliberation and deliberate ideas of how I'm going to go and why I'm going to go here. But some places were just in many ways, like a surprise. Like I decided to happen upon something versus this was, by design.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the themes, or at least the way they came up to me as I read the book. In the chapter Plantation Visitations, you talk about generational trauma and how it's triggered when we see these spaces, when we see these monuments. How do you see that in life today in terms of generational trauma? Are there still these trigger moments by what exists?
I think so, for sure. I think many of us have this experience. So I often go to Florida to visit my in-laws and in Orlando, and just, frequently, I go to Disney World with my kids. But
I'm glad you said your kids. I was like, where are we going?
there's a lot of adults who love Disney World.
Yes.
A lot of adults who love it, and that's okay, that's fine. But, I'm often triggered anytime I'm like watching the news or just like looking at the weather or I'm seeing street signs, and anytime I see Sanford, Florida, I immediately think of Trayvon Martin. I like that doesn't go away, right? And I think many of us in the global majority can point to those experiences that we will never forget, that they live coded in our existence and our experience. And so, I think there are examples of that every day.
But here's what's so interesting. Those spaces aren't monuments.
Yeah, well, are they?
Or are they?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing erected that reminds people of what was lost.
Yeah.
We only seem to celebrate those who caused the loss.
Yes. But in this book, I also talk about the things you can't see, right? The things that are there in front of you that maybe you should see, right? And I think this book also talks about the expanding the definition of what a monument is. A monument is not just some physical structure of bronze or some other, sculpting material. Like monuments live in our bodies. They live in our minds. They live in our subconscious. Like we hold certain images and people and ideas on pedestals in our lives, whether we see them or not, right? And so I think many of us, in many ways are walking monuments, right? We mark our bodies with things that are significant to us in terms of, tattoos or other piercings or markings. Like we are honoring the people that have come before us in many ways. So it's not just about physical structures.
So with that in mind, you wrote in the chapter, The Lesson Before Dying, you talk about your experience at Morehouse, particularly when you transferred from the University of New Orleans, and you were so excited that there would be courses that you wouldn't have to repeat.
Yes.
Until the chair of the, and I wrote this down because I don't want to misquote what he said, the chair of the
History department
said that you needed to take the course over, even though you got an A, because the history of the world did not begin in Europe.
It did not.
Talk about how our lives are unconsciously shaped by art that ignores that fact.
Whew. So just to kind of give you some more context of that experience, so I transferred to Morehouse, and I gotten A's in pretty much all my classes. But this one class I was trying to transfer, the history of Western civilization, this professor was like, we're not going to accept that. And I was pissed. I'm like, yo, come on, man. I'm not, I'm a junior. I'm not about to sit in some class with some freshmen. Like, I know history is fine. And it took me a while to kind of appreciate what he was saying, but that began my unlearning of white supremacist culture. And that exists everywhere. And that was just one experience I had at Morehouse. I had others where I described, reading Jane Eyre again. But instead of reading it, I read its counter-narrative, which described the inhumanity that was in the text, right? And so these things, white supremacy, we're all complicit, all of us. I mean, that's the mastery of the devil, is that it's been around for about 6-7 centuries, and it infuses all of our beliefs and behaviors and ideas. It makes people want to change, bodies of water to other things, right? It makes people want to change the names of schools and other ideas. It's with us, whether it's in, as a Black American, I know that I've espoused beliefs of colorism. I've favored other people unconsciously, right? But we have to work against that, right? There's no in between, especially today. There's no neutrality. Either you are actually working to uphold the laws of white supremacy, or you're actively working against them. So you have to decide that. And this book challenges you to think about that. Like, where do you lie? Like, what can you be doing? I'm not asking you to do everything. I'm just asking you to do something.
But how do people even attempt to do something when every attempt you're hit with, now you're woke, which is the improper use of the way it was introduced in the Black community is now pejorative.
Yeah.
But how do you do that when there's so much frightening counter resistance against that?
I think the first thing you have to face your fear, right? The fear of being afraid is often greater than the actual experience, right? And this book opens in a scene where I'm talking to 3 white supremacists, and it's just me. And anything could have happened, but we have to not be afraid of living our best lives, right? And I think it reminds me often of The Alchemist. I teach The Alchemist often. I read it often. For those of us who know this book, I'm thinking about this whole notion of when Santiago is in the crystal merchant shop and he has achieved a certain sense of wealth and comfort, and he can live his days as a wealthy man. But the alchemist comes to him and lets him know that eventually you're going to hate your life. Eventually you're going to come to resent it. So all of the comforts that we think that are providing us or insulating us from living in a better world will eventually come back to haunt us. And I think, we all have to face that. Whatever that is for you, it's up to you to look in the mirror and to say, what could I be doing more? How could I show up differently in my life? Sometimes that's talking to your brother-in-law. Sometimes that's telling your mom that that's racist. Sometimes that's talking to, your family members and really trying to get them to say that, hey, look, we're actually, white supremacy is coming for us all. It's not just about me, as like I said, a member of the global majority. So we all have work to do.
I think the toughest thing that I had to read in the book was the part where you talked about being pulled over, arrested, and detained. And I think it was hard to read because so many of us have a story of someone that we know that has happened to. And I think what made it difficult was how cavalier they were after they held you for 24 hours. Oh, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
And I thought about some of what you wrote earlier, talking about how there's trigger moments. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to ask, how does that create a trigger moment in the ways that we're talking about monuments? And I wanted to read back a quote that you put, which I thought, when I read this almost made me cry. You said, "There are no markers to indicate the time and place of my arrest. No plaques outlining the officers' names, but you will always see the place where you learned what it was like to spend a day in chains." Mm-hmm. And that stopped me cold. And in the context of what this book is talking about, please draw that connection.
Well, today Williamsburg is still not one of my favorite neighborhoods for that reason.
And I'm sorry, I just wanted to really stress this wasn't in the South, which is where most of our conversations are happening. Yeah. This happened in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
This happened in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I had to go to work here the next day, and I remember Rosita is not here. Rosita's since retired, but I remember telling my wife to draft an email while I'm in a cell to tell her I won't be at work. So it was a tough moment because, again, I had to kind of just swallow that and just show up again, right? But I think that's the story of many of us. So this book is singular in the sense that it's a memoir and essays, but it's not just about me. right? I talk about the story of my brother. I talk about the story of Philando Castile. I talk about the story of many Black Americans and how, we are unexceptional in the hatred for us, it didn't matter that, I read a lot of books, that, that I was a professor. It didn't matter to that cop. So yeah, I mean, these things are triggering. To be in space as a Black person is triggering. I wanted that to be conveyed in this book many ways. Some of you may have seen this show, Atlanta by Donald Glover. If you haven't, it's a fantastic show. One thing I really love about it is that sense of the surreal that he conveys, of the moments where you're like, wait a minute, is it me? Am I tripping? Like, did something happen that I'm missing? Like, am I really being oppressed this openly? Like, did I do something to deserve this? Right? There's so many moments in my life and our lives where that is the case. And so I wanted this book to allow people the perspective to open their eyes and look around, right? To be present, to slow down, and just observe the world around you and to see what it's telling you.
And is it just simply to observe the world around you, or to observe the way the world impacts others?
Yeah, it's both. It's both and, for sure. How is it? It's because it's not always about us. And many of these stories are the stories of my ancestors, right? Sometimes I'm really taking a step back. When I go to South Dakota, or when I'm talking to my great grandmother, I retreat and really am just trying to document the things that they're telling me, right? Because I want this to be a marker of this moment. I want people to kind of remember where we were so we can be somewhere else.
So much of the book talks about that notion of taking a moment to take a look at who we are, and take a look so we can be someone else.
Yeah.
So I want to go to your epilogue.
Mm-hmm.
And these are your words, and so pardon me if I read it.
It's well, no, they're good. I think all the words in here are pretty good. I'm a little biased.
This is the last paragraph of the epilogue. It's fine to tidy your house in preparation for dinner guests, but when they arrive, how will your food sustain them? The work of clearing the land of racist iconography is underway, a wonderful corrective toward the beautification of our spaces, but these efforts need more fuel. This fuel looks like real repair as a demonstration of our immeasurable capacity for love, wherein the violence and ignorance of our history are overcome, and the lasting solve is the overdue payment owed to us for our sacrifice and service to this land. It's pretty powerful.
Thank you.
The efforts need more fuel.
Mm-hmm.
How do we fuel repair in this current climate?
Well, I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of questions, and I think the first thing we need to do is keep asking questions, keep being more curious, keep pushing forward, keep trying to unearth all of the lies that are being told. But you also got to stand up. You also got to speak out. Like, when you see it, you got to call it out. And unfortunately, I think things have to get a lot worse before they get better. I think we have to come together, or be forced, together. There's many people who voted for this administration, as you've recently seen, that are having second thoughts. It's like, wait a minute, like, I didn't know that they were gonna deport my girlfriend. I didn't know that, my loan as a farmer was gonna be cut. I didn't know that as a federal worker I was gonna lose my job if I voted for this guy. And so I think a lot of suffering has to happen for people to kind of understand what it means to be a member of the global majority, right? And to kind of say, okay, there's a force against us that is really out for just a money grab. You want to cut all of the funding for research and, prop up these really imbeciles, people who have no expertise in many fields, and then you want to cut taxes for billionaires. So it's like, it's open. It's like, this is not a surprise. They're not trying to hide their evil. And so we need to just like, hey, look, like, what is our life going to be? Like, what are we're at a precipice. I think we're at a moment where, I truly think that we're at an apocalyptic kind of moment. And we need to kind of figure out a way, as Kendrick says, to turn the TV off, right? And turn the cell phones off, turn the social media off, and figure out our ways how to come together. Collective will is always, the history of the world has demonstrated that collective will changes and removes, dictators.
But if I may, there are some folk who are not surprised. And they've been sort of pushing that this is what it will look like if you follow this path. And so my question is about the connection. So you've talked a lot about your family and your lineage and your history, and it's given you some great insight to what this would look like.
Yeah.
I also am very grateful for my family, my parents, my mother who's here today. Hello.
Hi, Mom.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful for them because as growing up in the civil rights movement, I was clear about what had happened to them. And so I know my generation, what it means when I'm able to do. Even being able to sit in front of a room with people and talk on a microphone.
Amen.
That's not something that was always believed to be possible.
Certainly.
So how do we bridge this gap between history and our current understanding of the world, specifically as it pertains to students and the educators who teach them?
Okay. Giving me the easy questions. Look, I think it's about hunger, right? And recognizing that the people are trying to starve us, mentally. And I'm encouraged, in places like Florida, where many books are banned, where it's taught that slavery was a good thing for the Africans who were kidnapped and sold.
Taught them skills.
Yeah, I'm encouraged that in those places, students are now having Saturday school. They're saying, we're going to learn our own history. Like, what, we don't need this. You are clearly trying to espouse lies, and so we're going to learn our own stories. And so I think that is really what has to happen. I think another really damning thing that we're all kind of wrapped in is technology, right? What has created, social media and the rapid kind of growth, like technology has grown more than any other industry in our lifetimes, like exponentially, right? Like like cars, if you just think about like in terms of the history of cars, they maybe go twice as fast, but there haven't been like crazy developments. But technology, is there, whether it's social media, AI, but these technologies are not making our lives better. Actually, they're just really kind of devaluing the human experience. They're making us depressed and lonely and less engaged, right? The farce or the rub is that, the more time we spend online, the less time we spend living, right? And what has happened? We've propped up, a person like Elon Musk. Like this is the response to what we've been fed, and now we're addicted to these things. And so that are not offering us anything in terms of human development, human evolution. It's great to be able to write an email, and that's cool technology, that's fine. But like how many of us are now like working too much because your email always is on, right? How many of us, and look, I'm not going to talk about all the students, some of whom are on phones now. But I get it. It's an addiction. Look, it is. But it really saddens me, again, how much worse we have to kind of devolve before we realize that, wait a minute, like the people who are in control of this, the billionaires who in control all of these technologies don't participate in it. They don't let their children use it. They don't use it. They're very clear about that. Like, this is destructive. We thought we were doing something good, but now the world has changed and it's destroyed societies. It's really, in many ways, destabilizing democracy. Russia didn't necessarily do anything illegal by their participation in our election in 2016. They just used the tools that Facebook provided for them to spread disinformation. And so that disinformation spread 6 times faster than the truth. And so we need to kind of take a step back from those spaces. I truly believe and go back to reading and books and really trying to understand truth and come to some sort of common understanding. Like, we have to agree that, hey, the Holocaust did happen. Hey, slavery did happen, and we can't go back to this.
But there's a movement against that. So I'm wondering how you push that. Like last month, Elon Musk was at a rally where he virtually told Germans there's too much focus on past guilt and we need to move beyond that.
Yeah.
Just last week, there was a letter that came from the DOE's Office of the Civil Rights that said race-conscious spending for activities and programs, including cultural centers like we have here, is illegal. So there seems to be this movement that encourages you not to learn, not to think critically, and not to get off your phone. So how do we fight that? Because if you don't understand that we are repeating things that we've seen before, that's a problem.
I'm going to offer another suggestion to this. I think we need to kind of keep having sex. You're like, what? What is this guy? Well, let me get to where I'm going with this.
Now my mom is in the room, so you better explain this one.
Okay, Mama. I think the way you got here might have been, but what I mean by that is that these white supremacists are very clear that the world's becoming less white, and we need to start kind of being more in each other's communities and cultures. And I would love for us all to kind of continue to grow together versus apart. Like we should not be isolating ourselves so much. And I think that's, humans are very simple, in terms of our desires, our base desires. But what's happening is like we're being reduced to certain things without the higher order thinking. Like, I think the only thing that makes us different from other beasts is our brains, is the size of our brains. That's it. We are also animals. We are, a special species because we have brains, but we have to use them, and we have to continue to kind of, push what that means. But I'm hopeful. Look, I believe in the human imagination. I truly do. So.
And you said I asked some really easy questions, so I'm going to end with a hard one.
Okay.
No. You talked we were back here, you talked a lot about your children and your love for them.
Yeah.
You have a birthday celebrating
tomorrow.
My
son is turning 6 tomorrow.
And as I said earlier, this book was sort of like a journey for you, very cathartic, personal journey. What hope do you see for your children? What future do you see for them with the work that we have done to dismantle this and the effort that we have going forward?
Look, I lean into optimism because otherwise I would just be a wreck. There's a lot to be pessimistic about. There's a lot to be angry about. But like, how do I continue to wake up every day? And my kids give me hope. I don't know. I mean, I hope that we can value science. I hope that we can start to value climate change. I hope that we can start to understand that diversity is actually a good thing for society, right? Because diversity exists within the natural world. So why are we trying to remove it from the human world, right? So I mean, I hope that they are inspired by books like this and others, and to truly work towards some sort of collective will, towards a greater good that moves away from capitalism. Because I mean, I can think what's happening in terms of these social media companies and all of the richest people in the world, like capitalism is cannibalizing humanity. It's killing us. It really is. It's not working in its current iteration. And so I hope we can figure out ways in which, me having does not mean that there's so many people who don't.
Well, I have enjoyed talking to you, but I have been told I must open the floor for questions. There are microphones.
If you must.
If I must. There are microphones on either side. So if you have a question, please come. And I just want to remind people that it's for questions, not commentary.
I am a professor. I know how to make sure that you're asking your question. No questions?
Are there any questions? Or?
This is the moment in class when everyone talks at once. Here's a question here. Someone's going to rise to the mic here.
All right.
Hi, thank you for this.
Hey, I don't know if the mic is on.
Hello?
There we go.
Okay. Thank you for this. It was great.
You're welcome.
Suppose I had some influence on campus, which I do.
Okay.
What do you think? You've kind of touched on this, but what do you think we can do as a college community to resist what's going on right now? What kind of things would you like to see?
I think we need to value diversity more. I think we need to continue to support all of the different cultures, all of the different people, all of the different languages. Everything people need to feel safe. I think that's the most important thing. And I think we need to figure out ways to have conversations with each other. One of the things that I do in this book and what I did at the very beginning is like I'm speaking to people who have differences of opinion with me, not necessarily just to correct them, but also to learn and figure out ways in which people have been sidetracked. I truly hope that, well, I believe that all humans are redeemable. I believe that as a fact, absolute fact. And so I think we need to continue to make people feel welcome and warm and really work towards like anti-racism, work towards equity in all respects, whether it's sex, sexuality, gender, all of it. This is who we are, right? We've developed the language to self-identify in really fantastic ways, and we can't go backwards. I don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm happy to talk to you about this.
yeah, I would say you can give me a platform. I can keep coming back, and we can keep talking about it.
I can give you a platform.
Okay, let's do it. Any other questions? Not all at once. Do you have any other questions?
Of course.
We can all look at each other. Oh, some people coming down, or are they leaving? I hope you have a good day. Yes. Here's a question here. I'll repeat it.
Oh.
Yeah. 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 So the question is, how do I work through fear? Like, how do you, because we're all afraid. That's also a human emotion, right? How do you work through that? I'll tell you, like, what I did, and hopefully that inspires you to kind of figure out that answer for you. But we all have it. We all have something that can push us forward. So in that moment, I was remembering my great-grandmother and her life and her legacy, and really remembering that that's also my story. So there's a passage in this where my great-grandmother, who was 96 at the time, and she is speaking to me as if she knows that this is the last time we're going to speak. I didn't know it, but I felt like she did. And that was it. That was the last time before she passed away. And she, in that conversation, retold the story of her life to me. And many times I didn't necessarily want to hear it because she was a very bitter woman in many ways. But the story that she told me was of her grandfather being lynched, her mother dying for lack of health care, right? She had a curable illness, but she died because she was black. Her sister dying as a teenager, her father, all of the losses that she suffered, right? She lived in the Deep South from Mississippi during Jim Crow and experienced all of this viscerally. Like, she knows what hatred looks like, right? And in that conversation, she says, Irvin, you know, I might be afraid of a bear, a snake maybe, but a human being, not me, honey. And just to hear her tell me that, and in the same conversation for her to tell me that she had never gotten over her grandfather being lynched, I couldn't walk around in the world being afraid. Like, my ancestors have suffered more, right? I can't do that. And so I think all of us needs to find that why, that purpose in life. What is it that you really care about? And, you know, at that moment, like, I was there for a reason. I had come there to engage with these monuments, and I couldn't walk away. I couldn't be myself. I couldn't sleep well knowing that I was afraid to kind of face what I needed to. And so we all need to figure that out. I think we all need to tap into our stories and our legacies to figure out how do you face fear. And the more you do it, I talk about this in the book, the more you face fear, the more you become empowered, right? The easier it becomes, you know? I'll tell you a little something that seems a little frivolous, but one of the things that I hate doing is writing emails. It's just like I don't necessarily enjoy it. I like engaging with people in personal ways, and my wife's just like, "What's wrong with you?" You know, it's a way of communication, right? Or asking people for things. But I say all that to say, to illustrate, the more I do it, the more I get into the space of asking for people, asking for things, or sending out emails and following up, the easier it becomes, the less weighty it becomes. And that's a very simple kind of thing, but I think that's what all fear is, right? But we can't be afraid. I'll end with this. We can't be afraid to be our best selves, to be the best version of yourself. You know, I don't have much time here. All our lives are finite, and I want to live the best life I can, you know, while I have time. She's going to give you the mic there.
Yeah, sorry. I'm used to teaching I used to teach in a room like this, and I did it without a microphone. So, and I'm wondering if in these, in your journey, if you had the occasion to meet and talk to defenders of the white supremacy monuments, and what those encounters, if you could share any of that with us.
So the book opens with me talking to three of these defenders. First page, I'll recreate it for you. So I drive up to a street that was named for Jefferson Davis. It's no longer named Jefferson Davis Parkway, but it was a long-standing street in New Orleans. And I'm going there to see the remains of Jefferson Davis's statue, which has been taken down. But directly across the street, there's three white supremacists sitting under a tent, and they're surrounded by Confederate flags and MAGA flags. And I'm there to look at the thing across the street, but I couldn't look away. I was like, okay, I can't just stand here and act like I don't see them. And I was curious, honestly. I was like, well, why are they standing there? Like, what are they looking for? And we have this conversation about the origins of the Civil War. And I told them the truth, and they didn't like it. And I walked away. But look, I was terrified. I was terrified. But there are many moments that I am engaging with people in these ways. And again, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to point the finger at like these are the bad people. This is what you should avoid, because I think it's easy for all of us to point out a boogeyman, and what that does often is lets us off the hook, right? Because we don't interrogate all of the negative kind of behaviors that we also espouse, whether it's subconsciously or consciously. So yeah, there's many moments throughout the book where I'm engaging with folks that have views contrary to truth or to my own beliefs. And I don't know if this is true, but I wanted to really try to give them space to kind of express themselves. I wasn't trying to have any got you moments. I want people's humanity to come forward.
I have a question.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I'm standing here. I know that you are one of, if I can think correctly, 3 black male professors in the English department full-time?
That may be right, yeah.
All right. And you brought up that you had to come to work after being arrested.
Correct.
I'm curious about what it felt like to teach the next day, here specifically, and what it felt like to have to talk to your students. How did you process your position and your positionality, because those are 2 things in that moment, as you drove to and from this particular campus in Bayside, in one of the most diverse boroughs in the country, or counties in the country?
Yeah.
And then my second question is if you would be kind enough to read one of your favorite passages from your book.
Okay, cool. I was hoping that I could read. Look, unfortunately, and this is the story of Black America, I've had a lot of practice with that feeling of waking up with incredible disappointment and despair based on nothing of my own doing, right? And so I've suffered enough losses to be able to say, look, this is a new day. How can I show up for people who are here? And in many ways, I think being in front of a classroom was therapeutic. This was my purpose, my way to kind of give back and to kind of continue to exert and exercise my humanity, that I wouldn't be reduced to whatever that cop thought I was. So, but in terms of, did I lose the second question? What was the second question? Oh, read. It wasn't a question. It's like I did lose it.
Read a passage.
Yeah, I'm gonna read a passage.
I think the request was a favorite. Favorite? Okay.
Favorite. I'm gonna read something short. I now wear glasses. I've just learned this within a year, the recent year, but I think I might have left them. Oh, in my coat. Hold on. Yes, so I do have the drugstore kind. Thank you so much. They're just readers. My coat's here. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate you stepping in.
I know it's hard to get used to it.
Oh man, I was so disappointed.
My sister wants to give me chains.
I was so disappointed. I was, wake up and look at my phone, try to read the paper or something. And I was like, honey, you know how when you wake up and you kind of your eyes have to like warm up, you got to shake it off? She's like, no, that's not a thing. And so I was like, oh, okay. I'm going to read a short passage that I think, I'm going to read from the end of the prologue. I've kind of described the beginning. The beginning is when I meet these folks. And this is like 3 pages. It's page 16. And I think this also speaks to a lot of the questions that you guys have been asking me, like as if I have all the answers. I don't, but I have a lot of questions. And I think questions are often more important and more impactful than answers. So I'm going to read from 16. I've learned enough to know that I'm called to testify, to elucidate the complexities of space and time through language as a practice of study and expression of art. To this end, I've been a teacher for more than 2 decades, learning as much as I've taught, born of the tribe that is aware of its design and feels compelled to say something when it needs to be said, to do what needs to be done, to face the fear of bearing witness when a soul is trapped in a chokehold or the space beneath a knee. Some call us writers, activists, or preachers, but such titles are short-sighted. Each of us is capable. None of us can do everything, but we all can do something. And sometimes this something means meeting the eye of the devil to tell him that his hatred won't go unnoticed. If called upon, if your goings about life are interrupted by the abuse of your kind, it's your responsibility to make the murderers see you, to hold them accountable for their deeds and take up as much space as possible. It might mean holding up a phone to live stream an arrest, or resisting a protest organized to impede your rights, or passing out stacks of banned books to children. It might mean something more benign, like walking through a museum as the only Black person in sight. But even this invites danger. Who knows what you may see hanging in the galleries? Who knows how your psyche will respond? To be clear, I'm not saying you should put yourself in harm's way or arm yourself with weapons so you can shoot the antagonists or break any laws that don't deserve to be broken. But I'm also not telling you to shy away from what needs to be done when the stakes are life and death, which is to say, every day. I didn't come to this journey to uncover the disturbing truths concealed in our art and public spaces lightly. My ancestors were the guides. They've taught me to teach what I've learned, to shepherd towards safety when required, and to strike when our foes are vulnerable, when their hatred falters and make space for correction. This isn't to say I figured anything out, save for the value of opening my eyes to the world and sitting in silence so that it slows down and reveals what I'm seeking. The blessings, which I might call lagniappe, or the unexpected, the invaluable understandings that emerge without warning. I'm here to tell you that the meditations work, that the significance of these silences has been reinforced time and again throughout the course of my life across continents. So, when the monuments started to fall after the murder of George Floyd in May 2020, I recognized the opportunity to deepen my understanding of how these streets and statues have shaped our times. I had traveled throughout North America, the Caribbean, and Europe, searching, gazing upon statues, staring at frescoes, strolling through parks, listening for voices, on the hunt for validation of theories I had already proven. To reimagine our world, we must recognize how our past lies in the symbols we see every day. But my frame was off. I was looking anywhere and everywhere except the place where I first came to understand the world, the place that just so happens to be the epicenter of American slavery. Understanding that symbols are not static must be our guiding premise. They can't be reduced to mere shapes and signs, colors and shades. They live in our minds as much as they appear on the wall fronting the Cup Food store where Floyd was killed. They occupy a large space in our conscious and subconscious understandings of each other and the world. They remain significant sources of our actions, more so than we realize. How we see and treat each other is the domain of symbols and stereotypes and misconceptions. Only when we engage each other do we see things we can't physically and reinterpret the symbols. The same holds true for monuments. We need to spend time with them and learn their stories to determine their value. But if we overlook the task, if we dismiss it as an insignificant act, racism will continue to infect society, and I'll have to find more space in my head for lawless executions.
And on that note, we will say thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. and for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. It means a lot.
Can we have a real good round of applause? You want to say something, Tanisha? For our colleagues, I want to thank you, Irvin, for taking time out of your book tour. He is not here this semester. He's on tour, right? And he has given us this such a special moment. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Tanisha, for staying beyond your paid time to handle this and for sending out all the constant contacts on our behalf. We do have a bookstore who is here with us. I'm waiting for Kathleen or Mara to come in to talk to us just really quickly about who they are, because we really love their mission, and they've come out from Port Washington. Kathleen, come on down. Come on. Can they hear? We can't hear you from up there. They're going to tell us just their mission. They will be outside selling copies of Irvin's book. Irvin has also agreed, listen, we're very special tonight, to sit and sign. He will be there for about 40 minutes. So in the front, where the books are. So they'll be selling, and then Irvin, there's a mic right there if you want to use that one, will be signing his books so you can take a picture. Can they take a picture with you?
Certainly.
We are so honored to have him as a professor here. I don't know if y'all understand, but his book is being sold in the Smithsonian bookstore. That's all I'm going to say. Go ahead.
Thank you. Everywhere books are sold.
And everywhere books are sold, but that one's important, right? That one's really everywhere books are sold. Kathleen?
Hi, I'm Kathleen. I'm opening an independent bookstore. I appreciated what you were saying about billionaires. So we believe in books. We love your book. And we're out front. So thank you.
Thank you. Don't buy it from Bezos. Buy it from them. All right.
Big Book Report New York. Yeah, don't buy from Amazon. Buy from the women who have their store in front. Thank you all so very much for coming, for staying this long. Thank you again. Thank you to the department. Thank you. Have a wonderful night. We'll be in the foyer with books.